Hello and welcome. Glad you could join us for our new course. Today, we're going to set up and host multiple websites on a single DigitalOcean droplet using virtual hosts. Although we're using DigitalOcean, you could follow along with any cloud hosting provider of your choice. In case you're wondering why you would want to take this class, well, there's many reasons. Primarily, you may want to cut costs on your own hosting fees if you have multiple websites. Many administrators create separate servers for each website, and this can quickly become very costly. By hosting multiple websites on one resource, you eliminate the need for so many different servers. Another reason is that you want to start your own hosting company where you charge clients a fee for hosting and administering their website. Although this course is only an introduction, it will give you a good starting point for branching out into offering hosting services. In this class, we'll be configuring our server using LambStack on Ubuntu 18.04. This is the latest version, as of today's date, but the concepts we cover can be applied to any version including or higher than Ubuntu 14.04. Keep in mind, if you're using an older version of Ubuntu, you no longer receive security updates, so it would be a great time to update. This course requires some basic knowledge of executing commands through terminal. If you're on a Windows machine, you can use PuTTY. If you need further information on how to use these tools and run basic commands on a server, you can take our Web Development Masterclass. However, we'll be running the commands directly in this class, so you can easily just follow along as well. In this course, you'll learn to configure name servers, DNS zone files, and virtual hosts in order to serve multiple websites on a single server. Each of our domains will have a separate SSL certificate as well. The SSL certificate authority we'll be using is Let's Encrypt. This is a great resource if you're looking for a quick, free, and simple way to secure your web pages. Another point worth mentioning is we'll be doing all our setup and configuring using a root user account. As explained in our Web Development Masterclass, it's always a good practice to disable the root user account once setup is complete and create a new user to keep your server secure. Since we already covered this in another course, we won't be going over it again. Setting up multiple domains on one virtual server is fairly easy. Keep in mind it needs to be done carefully from the beginning so you don't run into issues later on that can be more challenging to resolve. For this class, you'll need the following items: a Mac or Linux system with terminal or any command line console of your choice. If you're on a Windows machine, you'll need to download PuTTY SSH client. You'll need the domain names for each site that you want to host on your DigitalOcean droplet. This means you must have the domain names registered and accessible. If you do not have domain names, you will not be able to install the SSL certificate or test your configuration. You'll need access to the name server configuration from your domain name registrar. You'll also need a DigitalOcean account, or an account with any virtual cloud hosting provider of your choice. The first step in this process is to log into your DigitalOcean account. If you don't have an account, click the Sign Up button. You'll be prompted to enter the email address and the password you'd like to use. Once you've created an account, you'll have to enter some basic payment details, and then you'll be able to use DigitalOcean to create servers. Since I already have an account, I'm going to go ahead and click the Login button. I'll go ahead and enter my login credentials. We are now on the DigitalOcean dashboard. So here under the Resources tab, you can see the different droplets that you have, and also the different domains that are attached to this project. On the left-hand side, you can see the different projects that are in this DigitalOcean account. A project, you can think of it as a folder that contains different droplets and different domains, different settings that pertain to different websites. So since we're going to be working on a completely new project, I'm going to go ahead and click the New Project button here. So we're now prompted to enter a name for the project. I'll go ahead and call it Main Server. Now you can call your project anything you like. Because this server is going to be hosting multiple domains, I gave it a more generic name. If your server was going to be dedicated for one website, you could enter a name that's more relevant to that website. It's not required that you add a description, but it is required that you select a purpose. So I'll go ahead and select development. Now it's asking if we want to move any existing resources to our main server. We don't want to do this, so I'm going to go ahead and click skip for now. On the left menu, you can see that the main server project is now available. So now back on this main page, we can go ahead and create our droplet. To do so, click the Create Droplet button. In this section, we can select the type of distribution we want to configure on our droplet. Since we're going to be working with Ubuntu, select Ubuntu 18.04 64-bit. If it's not the default here, you can select it from the menu. The next thing we'll need to do is select a size for the droplet. Now I'm going to select the smallest size of 1 GB memory, 1 CPU, 25 GB of SSD disk space, and 1 TB transfer per month. If you know that you're going to be using this server for something much more extensive than just learning purposes, then you'll want to select a higher configuration. And that configuration will depend entirely on your needs. So for now, I'm just going to select the first option. Now we're going to scroll down the page. And the next thing we'll need to do here is select a data region. If you're going to be using this web server for serving web pages to your customers, you'll want to select the region closest to your customers. This will ensure your website loads as fast as possible when visitors access your site. But again, this is just for demonstration purposes, so I'm going to go ahead and select New York. Now scrolling down, the next thing we'll need to do here is choose a host name for this server. So again, because this server will be hosting multiple sites, I can give it a generic name. I'll call it main server, just like we did for the project. Now go ahead and click Create. You'll see the blue status bar appears, and that indicates the progress on the deployment of this server. And it normally doesn't take more than 1 or 2 minutes. So the server has now been created, and you can see that an IP has been assigned to this server by default. DigitalOcean has also emailed you your password for this server. So you'll want to make sure that you log into your email and make sure that that email is there, because we'll be using that password shortly. This is known as your root administrative password. With our server created, you can see the IP address here. One point worth mentioning is that this IP is permanently attached to this droplet. It cannot be reassigned to another droplet. This year, DigitalOcean introduced a new feature called floating IPs, and this allows us to create an IP and attach it to any droplet of our choice at any time. This feature is very similar to the Amazon Web Services dynamic IP feature. If you're using Amazon Web Services, you can do the same thing. This feature is extremely useful to have for many purposes. For example, Say you build an application and at a specific date you create a snapshot of it. A snapshot in DigitalOcean is like a disk image that can easily be reinstalled at any time on any other server. Now, say you develop this application and something goes horribly wrong, and you need to revert back to the snapshot at a previous date. Typically, changing an IP address for your server can be a very big hassle. It's something you generally want to avoid. So floating IPs make it very simple to deploy a new server, load your snapshot, and easily assign your IP to the new server. Apart from this example, there are many other benefits of using floating or transferable IPs. And for this reason, let's go ahead and attach a floating IP to this droplet. Click over here where it says Start using floating IPs. Now you'll want to click in this menu here. You want to select the server that you just deployed. In this case, we deployed main server. On the right here, press the Assign Floating IP button. So just give that a second or two, and you can see that the floating IP was successfully added to the server we just created. So perfect, that's all there really is to it. Now that the IP has been assigned, you can administer your server using this floating IP rather than the permanent IP that we'd seen earlier. Just as a side note, it is always a good practice to set up your floating IP in the beginning. This gives you the flexibility of transferring the IP at a later date should you need to. With our server created, we can now go ahead and set it up. If you're on a Mac system, you'll need to open Terminal. Terminal can be used to execute command lines to your server. If you're on a Windows system, you can use PuTTY. You're not limited to these tools. Feel free to use any command consoles you feel more comfortable using. If you are using Terminal, the first thing you'll need to do is connect to your server. To do so, type in SSH root at, and then you're going to need your IP address. So remember, we're using the floating IP. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. I'm going to paste it and press enter. You'll be prompted with a security message. Just type in yes and press enter. Now it's asking for your password. So as I'd explained earlier, you would have received an email from DigitalOcean that looks something like this. It just confirms that your droplet is set up and ready to go, and then it gives you your access credentials. So in this case, this is what your password is going to look like. Of course, it'll be something different, but that's the format. And your username is root. We are going to be using the root account to set all this up. So I'm going to copy the password and paste, and then press enter. So right away, it's going to ask you to change your existing password. So enter your current password. So I'm going to right click and hit paste again, press enter. And I'm going to enter a new password that's secure, but also easier to remember. Now you'll need to retype your new password just to confirm. So now you can see we're logged in as root user. And you can also see the server name that we'd assigned when we initially deployed the server in DigitalOcean. We can now go ahead and set up our web server. The first step is to install Apache. If you're new to web server configuration, Apache is an HTTP server that allows our web page visitors to establish a connection to our server and download the web page content. Remember, when anyone accesses your site, they're essentially downloading the page in order to view it through their browser. To start the Apache installation, we'll need to update the local package index. The package index is an index of files that are available for update. As soon as you launch your server, you'll want to run this command. Type in apt update. So you can see here that it says 4 packages can be upgraded. The next command we'll want to run is to install Apache. To do so, type in apt install apache 2. Just make sure you don't make any typos in the commands, otherwise they won't work properly. We're just prompted with a question. It says after this operation, 6,978 kilobytes of additional disk space will be used. Do you want to continue? We'll enter Y and press enter. So this is the progress bar here. You can see we're at 75%, and it typically shouldn't take more than 1 or 2 minutes for the entire process to be complete. Okay, so there we go. Apache 2 has now been installed, and we can test it by pulling up the default Apache page in our web browser. So what you want to do here is take your IP, copy it, paste it into your address bar and press enter, and you should see the default Apache 2 page over here. So as long as you see this page, then you know that it's working properly. Now that we have Apache installed, we can go ahead and install essential services including MySQL, PHP, and PHPMyAdmin. We'll start with MySQL. MySQL is a database management system. It organizes and provides access to databases where you can store information. A common example is storing customer information if you operate an e-commerce site. To install MySQL, type the following command. Now, if you're logged into the root account, you don't have to type in sudo, but I'll just keep it there because I'm copying and pasting the command lines to save a bit of time. So sudo apt install mysql-server and press enter. Okay, so at the first prompt, which just indicates that it's going to take 162 megabytes of additional disk space, which we're fine with, type in Y and press enter. So again, you'll see the progress bar appears, and it should go by fairly quickly. When the installation is complete, we can secure our MySQL installation. This is a good practice, and it just means getting rid of some of the dangerous default settings that can be a security risk to your database server. So to do so, type in the following command. And press enter. So we'll now go through the various prompts to complete this installation. The first one is it's asking if we want to use the validate password plugin. This can be used to enhance password security by default. So anytime you want to set a password, it will force you to stick to a certain format for the password, a secure format. It's great to use this if you're comfortable with MySQL. Also, if you don't intend on using many plugins, for example, WordPress, or if you're going to be installing phpMyAdmin, there can be certain things that conflict with this particular plugin. So for this purpose, we'll go ahead and type in no and press enter. So now we'll have to enter a password for MySQL. This is to connect to your database server. So again, just make sure that it's something secure, but something you can remember as well. If you pick a very complicated password, do remember to write it down and store it somewhere safely. And I'll just go ahead and re-enter it and press enter. I'll try that one more time. Okay, so the next prompt here is asking about anonymous users. It says by default, the MySQL installation has an anonymous user, allowing anyone to log into MySQL without having to have a user account created for them. This is intended only for testing and to make the installation go a bit smoother. You should remove them before moving into a production environment. So even though we're just setting this up, the ultimate goal is to move into production. So we'll go ahead and select yes to remove the anonymous user and press enter. Okay, the next thing is do we want to disallow root login remotely? Typically, you only want to allow the local host to log in as root. This is a great practice for security. And so I'm going to go ahead and select yes, disallow root login. So remote users cannot log in as root and press enter. By default, MySQL comes with a database named test that anyone can access. This is also intended only for testing and should be removed before moving into a production environment. So again, we don't need this test database. I'll go ahead and type Y and press enter. Okay, so the next step here is reloading the privilege tables, and this will ensure that all the changes we just made take effect immediately. So I'll type Y and press enter. And there it is. We're all done with setting up MySQL. One last item that remains here is to change our authentication method that MySQL uses to authenticate the root user. Although the default authentication method does offer some additional security, it conflicts with other tools that we need to install later, such as phpMyAdmin. So for this reason, we'll need to switch our authentication method from auth_socket to MySQL native password. And you'll understand how this works in just a second. This basically means we can use a regular password to authenticate. Now to do this, you're going to start by typing the following command. Okay, so now we've opened up MySQL. Now let's go ahead and check which authentication method each of our MySQL user accounts uses to authenticate. To do that, type in the following command. And press enter. The table that you see here does confirm that the root user does in fact connect with auth socket. To change this, we'll need to type a command. So I'll go ahead and paste in the command, but there's a parameter we'll need to change. So this is the command here. Okay, so we want to alter the authentication method for root at localhost. We want to identify with MySQL native password. Now you'll need to change over here where it says password. You need to type in the password you want to authenticate with. Okay, so I've entered the password I want to authenticate with, and I'm going to go ahead and press enter. So you'll see this message, query OK, and that tells you that the command was executed successfully. Now we'll need to run the flush privileges command, and this tells the server to reload the grant tables and put your new changes into effect. So this is what the command is, flush privileges, and press enter. Now that we've completed these steps, let's confirm that the root user no longer authenticates using the auth socket plugin. So type in the following command and press enter. We can confirm in this table that the root user now authenticates with MySQL native password and no longer with the auth socket plugin. Now that we have MySQL installed, we can install PHP. PHP is a powerful, widely adopted programming language that allows you to serve web content that is dynamic and interact with your users. With PHP integration, you can communicate with your MySQL databases to execute tasks such as inserting, updating, or retrieving data. Before we begin installation, you'll need to exit MySQL. So type in exit and press enter. To start the installation process for PHP, type in the following command. Type in Y at the prompt and press enter. So that's really all there is to it for installing PHP. For the changes to take effect, we'll go ahead and restart our Apache server by typing the following command. And press enter. We can now go ahead and test our PHP configuration to make sure it's working properly. To do this, we'll create a file called info.php and place it in our default HTML directory. The file that we'll be creating contains a basic script that displays data about our PHP configuration. So you can create this file by running the following command. So Nano is the text editor that we use. Okay, the HTML directory, that's the default directory that Apache serves our web content from. That will change when we create virtual hosts for multiple domains, but for now, that is the default directory. And info.php is the file we're going to be creating. So press enter. And now we're in Nano text editor. So the next thing to do here is just paste in a bit of code into this file. So it's a bit of PHP code. And this command here, php info, that is what's going to display the information about PHP on our server when we load this page on our web browser. So after you've typed in this code, you'll need to save this file. And to do that, I'm going to hold Control down and press X. Now it's going to ask me if I want to save the changes. I'm going to type in Y, and I'm going to press Enter to write the changes to this file. And there we go. Okay, so now what we can do is open your browser again. type in /info.php. And this is the file that should load as long as everything is working correctly. Okay, so it says the PHP version and a whole bunch of other information about your PHP configuration. Okay, one important point to mention here is you'll want to delete this file for your production server because it does contain a lot of information about your configuration that you wouldn't necessarily want. You wouldn't want this information in the wrong hands. So we'll go ahead and delete this file. So to do that, just type in the following command. It's the rm, and then point to the file on our server. So what that'll do is it'll remove it as soon as we execute it. So press enter. Now when I try to load that, it's no longer found. With Apache, MySQL, and PHP installed, we can go ahead and install phpMyAdmin. phpMyAdmin is a very handy tool that can be used to interact with your MySQL databases through a graphical user interface. This makes administration of databases much easier than trying to do it through executing command lines. Before we install phpMyAdmin, let's go ahead and update our package index like we did earlier. Although it's likely not necessary since we just updated our package index pretty recently, it's a good practice to run the update command prior to installation of any major component. So type in apt update, and now type in the following command to get phpMyAdmin. And press enter. Okay, type Y when prompted, press enter again. Here you'll need to select your web server. Make sure that you have Apache 2 highlighted. Also make sure you hit the space bar to make sure that Apache 2 is in fact checked, as you can see here. And once you've done that, press OK. Okay, so now you'll see a message. It says the phpMyAdmin package must have a database installed and configured before it can be used. If you're an advanced database administrator and know that you want to perform this configuration manually, or if your database has already been installed and configured, you should refuse this option. Okay, so I'll just move forward. We do want this installer to configure a database for phpMyAdmin. So make sure that you select yes and press enter. You'll now have to enter a MySQL application password for phpMyAdmin. So again, just make sure it's something you can remember and something that is secure. The installation process automatically adds the phpMyAdmin configuration file into the following directory that you see on your screen. So all we need to do now is enable the mbstring PHP extension by typing the following command. Okay, once you've entered that command, press enter. And the last step here is to restart Apache for the changes to be recognized. So type in this command and press enter. To make sure that phpMyAdmin has been installed successfully, you can type phpMyAdmin after your IP, and you should see the phpMyAdmin login page appear. So you can enter your username as root, And the password is the password that you'd configured during installation. Okay, and there it is. So this is the phpMyAdmin user interface. Okay, all your databases are here on the left, and it's a great tool for administering your databases. If you do want to master phpMyAdmin, we do have a whole section devoted to it in our web development masterclass, and that'll show you how to administer databases, work with different users, import, export data, and a whole volume of other information. Okay, but for now, I'll just hit the back button, or it's probably a better practice to log out. So this is the log out button right here, and it takes you back to the login page. So I'm just going to go back to our default index page. Before we continue, it's important to understand what we'll be doing in the next part of this course. We're now going to be setting up virtual hosts that allow multiple domains to be served from a single server. To recap, so far we've deployed a droplet, installed Apache, MySQL, PHP, and phpMyAdmin. So let's go ahead and get started on working with virtual hosts. It's important to understand that by default, Apache identifies the HTML directory in the www folder as the root folder for our web pages. This means when someone visits our primary website domain, Apache will load the index.html file located in the HTML directory. Now, when I say primary domain, what I mean is if you're only hosting one domain on your web server. If you're hosting multiple domain names, then you don't have a primary domain. Since we will be working with multiple domains, each domain will need to point to its own unique directory. So for example, xyz.com will need to load the default index page from the xyz.com folder that we create. Okay, so here is a sample of the directory structure we're going to be creating. In our www folder, we're going to create a directory for each domain name. So for example, if you had 2 domains, this is exactly what your directory structure would look like. The domain name as the folder name, and then inside that folder, we would have another folder called HTML. And inside the HTML folder would be all our website files. Okay, and that's the same if you had a second domain. That's exactly what it would look like, except that the domain name would be different. So instead of xyz.com, your second domain can be abc.com. So it's fairly straightforward, and you can have 10, 20, however many of these as you need it to have. So if you're running a small hosting company, you might have 100 clients. Well, you can set up 100 directories, each with a different domain name. So this is the first step before we actually go on to creating virtual hosts. And we'll see you in the next lecture. Before we can go ahead and configure our virtual host file, we'll need to make a directory for each domain that we want to host on this server. To do so, we'll use the following command. This is the make directory command. And we'll need to replace example.com with our first domain name. Once you've done that, go ahead and press enter. Now we'll need to change the permissions of this directory as well, but we'll do that in a moment. Before we do that, let's go ahead and make the directory for our second domain as well. So that way at least we have our folders created. And press enter. So one easy way to administer folders, rather than typing in command lines and doing it that way, is if you have an FTP agent, so for example, FileZilla or anything like that, it's a lot easier to just connect to your web server and administer files and folders that way. So I'm going to go ahead and launch FileZilla. And I'm going to go into my site manager. Now I already have this server configured here as test. If you don't, just click New Site. So you're going to select the SFTP method. And make sure you don't select FTP, select SFTP. For the host name, you're going to need your floating IP address. So go back to DigitalOcean and just copy this IP address here. And enter your IP address next to the host label. For logon type, select normal. You're going to log in as root user and type in your password that you selected when you initially deployed your droplet. And then click connect. Okay, you're going to receive a message just saying this server's host key is unknown. Just go ahead and click OK. Now you're going to scroll up. So just double click this folder here. And once you've gone up one directory, you're going to go in the var directory and then in the www directory. So as you can see, we have the two folders we just created. This is the first domain and the second domain. And what we're going to do is we're going to reset the permissions for both of these domains. So to do that, right-click on each domain and go to File Permissions. Make sure that it's 755. In this case, it is. So there's nothing left to change there. And the second one should be the same. 755. Okay, that's perfect. Now what we're going to do is create an HTML folder inside each one of these directories. So I'm going to click on this first directory. And I'm going to right-click and select Create Directory. Type in HTML. And just check to make sure that the file permissions are correct. Let's type in 755 and press OK. Now go up. Go into the second domain directory and create a folder called HTML again. And again, set the file permissions. Okay, so perfect. We now have our two domains. If you have other domains you'd like to add, you can go ahead and repeat that step for each domain that you'd like hosted on this server. Now, if you do have a number of domains here, you're probably going to just want to set the permissions for the entire www directory for now. And then as you build your web content, you can always set up individual file and folder permissions separately. But if you're dealing with a lot of domains, just right-click on your www folder, go to File Permissions. And what you can do is place a check mark in this box here, recurse into subdirectories. So what will happen there is every single folder inside the www directory will also have the same permissions that you establish here. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And so that, yeah, that's a lot faster if you're dealing with many different domains. Okay, so here we are back in terminal. And the next thing we need to do here is create the default index.html file that will load when somebody visits each domain. So each domain would need its own separate index.html file, which is relevant to that domain. Okay, so we can go ahead and create this file in Nano Text Editor. So just paste in the following command here. Make sure that you replace example.com with your domain name. We'll do one domain at a time, so you can start with the first one and then move on to the second. and press enter. Now inside this file, you'll need to paste in the following code. So it's just a basic HTML page. And the title for the first page is Welcome to Domain 1. Now you can replace Domain 1 with your actual domain name. And in the body, we're just going to have success domain 1 is configured correctly. Okay, you'll want to save this file by pressing Ctrl X, type Y at the prompt, and press enter. Now let's go ahead and create the index.html file for our second domain. So use nano again. All you need to do is change your domain name in the command to your second domain. And press enter. Be careful to avoid any typos. Any spelling mistakes in the domain names or folder names will cause issues later on. So press enter and just paste again. And this time I'm going to put welcome to domain 2. And success, domain 2 is configured correctly. Now save this file. Enter. Okay, and we'll see you in the next lecture. Welcome back. To recap, we've now set up 2 folders for each of our domains. We've also created a default HTML file that will load when somebody visits each domain. What we need to do now is set up the new virtual host files for each domain in order for all of this to work. This way, each domain will point to its unique directory and the web pages contained within it. The default configuration directive for Apache is located at this path. The default.conf file instructs Apache which directory to serve content from when the server is only hosting one domain. We need to make the virtual host file for our first domain since this server will host multiple domains. After this, we'll create a virtual host file for our second and third and fourth and however many domains you have. So to do this, start by making a new file by typing the following command. Replace example.com with your domain name. Okay, once you've done that, go ahead and press enter. Once you're in Nano Text Editor, type the following text. There's a few parameters which you'll need to change to reflect your domain name. So the first one is the email address. The second is the server name. And the server name is just your domain name without the www prefix. The server alias is your domain name with the www prefix. And once you've confirmed that everything is correct, go ahead and save the file. So Control X, Y at the prompt, and enter. So once you finish with those modifications, you'll need to enable this file using the following command. Okay, I accidentally executed that before I'd made the changes. So I'll just type that in again. Make sure you replace example.com with your domain name. And press enter. Once you've done that, you'll see the message enabling site displayed. And it'll also instruct you to restart Apache in order for you to activate this new configuration. So go ahead and reload Apache. After you typed in this command, press enter. So now that we have our first virtual host file created and enabled, we can go ahead and create the second one. The easiest way to do this is by duplicating the first one, renaming it, and making whatever changes we need to make in the new duplicated file. So to do that, you're going to type the following command. Sudo cp just means copy, and then you're instructing on which file you want copied. So I'm going to copy the file that we already configured. And this is going to be the new duplicated file that's created. We want the name of this file to be the second domain name. And press enter. Now let's go ahead and open this file, the second file we just created. We're opening it in Nano. And we'll have to change the parameters this time to match the second domain name. Again, make sure you haven't made any spelling mistakes or typos. And once you're okay with the changes, save the file. Type Y and press enter. Now let's go ahead and enable this configuration that we just created as well. So we're going to use that same command once again. Sudo a2ensit. This time we're doing the second domain. And press enter. Okay, so now that we have the two virtual host files created for the two domain names, we're going to disable the default configuration file. So type in the following. and press enter. Now we'll need to reload Apache for all these changes to take effect. Perfect, we've now created the two virtual host files for each of our two domains, and we've enabled them as well. The next step in this process will be to configure our name servers with our domain name registrar. So we'll see you in the next lesson. We're now at the stage where we can configure our domain name servers and DNS zone file. Name servers will instruct your domain registrar on which hosting company your domain should point to. The DNS zone file, on the other hand, is configured on your hosting company's admin panel, in this case DigitalOcean. The zone file contains information on which web server each domain should point to. By now you likely get the idea. After we configure the zone file for each domain, our web server delivers the web pages based on instructions from the virtual host file we created for each domain. I'll now go ahead and change my domain name servers so they point to DigitalOcean. Since my domains are registered with GoDaddy.com, I've pulled up their web page here. Now I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Okay, next to my domain, I'm going to click the DNS button. And when you scroll down, you'll see the heading name servers. This is the area you want to change. You want to make sure that your name servers are pointing to DigitalOcean. Right now, my name servers are pointing to Amazon Web Services. So I'll go ahead and change that. And the name servers for DigitalOcean are as follows. ns1.digitalocean.com, ns2, and ns3.digitalocean.com. And we don't need the last one, so I'm just going to delete it and press save. You'll need to do this for each domain that you'd like to host on your DigitalOcean droplet. So if you have 2 or 3 or however many domains you'll be using, you'll need to log into your registrar and change the name servers, make sure they're pointing to DigitalOcean. Now, if you're using a different virtual host provider, such as Amazon or Microsoft, it doesn't matter. Just make sure that you put in their corresponding name servers. We'll need to head back to DigitalOcean. In this lesson, we'll be securing each of our domains with SSL using Let's Encrypt. Let's Encrypt is a free, easy-to-use SSL certificate that can be installed within a few simple steps. Back in Terminal, we need to install the certbot software on our server. To do so, type in the following command. Once you finish typing in this command, press enter. Press enter to continue. Now install certbot's Apache package using the apt method. So type in this command and press enter. Type in Y at the prompt. In order for certbot to automatically configure SSL, it needs to be able to find the correct virtual host file for each domain in the Apache configuration. Since we already set up our virtual host directives, we can go ahead and obtain our SSL certificates. There's actually 2 ways of doing this. Typically, if you already have your domains configured, you can register a certificate for all the domains at once, and the syntax for this would be as follows. As you can see, we have each domain name, including its www prefix, in the command line. So each domain name precedes the -d flag. And so if you had 5 or 10 or however many domains, you could plug them all in at once over here to save time. However, most of the time you'll be adding certificates periodically as you register additional domains or take on more clients, in the case where you're running a hosting company. So for this reason, we'll register each certificate separately as you would normally do in the course of business. So let's go ahead and start with our first domain. You're going to type in this command here. You're going to replace example.com with your first domain name. Once you finish that, double check that you've entered the correct domain name. You don't want to make any mistakes here. And go ahead and press enter. Now it's going to ask you for an email address just for administrative purposes, so you can go ahead and enter that in. You have to agree to the terms of service. So type in A and press enter. Now it's asking if we'd be willing to share the email address with the Electronic Frontier Foundation. I'll just go ahead and select no. This is an important question. It's asking, do you want to redirect all requests to the HTTPS version of your website? Now, typically you do want to do this. If somebody types in www.yourdomain.com or types in your domain without the www prefix, whatever the case may be, we want all requests to redirect to the HTTPS version of our website. If for any reason you don't want that, then you're going to enter 1 here and press enter. But if you do want that, you're going to type in 2 and you're going to press enter. Okay, so perfect. As soon as you finish that, you'll see the congratulations method. Your certificate and chain have been saved at, and then it gives you the directory and file name. In a second, we will load our domain in our web browser again, just to make sure that it is secure. Make sure that the SSL lock is present. But before we do that, let's go ahead and create the certificate for our second domain as well. So again, you're going to use the same command and press enter. Since we've already configured the administrative email for our server, it's not going to prompt us for that again. All we have to do is decide whether we want to redirect all traffic for this domain to the HTTPS version of the site. So once again, we do. So I'm going to enter 2 and press enter. Okay, perfect. So we now have both our certificates installed for each separate domain. And all we have to do is test to make sure that it's working. Since we're accessing the first domain through a proxy service, the secure message here, that is not relevant to our SSL certificate. For the first domain, we will have to wait till the DNS propagates in order for us to view our SSL certificate over here. in the secure message area. But since our second domain works, we can certainly test that out. And you can see over here that it is labeled secure, and that means that our certificate is valid. And you can see here that it's issued by the Let's Encrypt authority. So everything is in order. So I'll just try the first domain again in case it has propagated. Oh, perfect. Okay, so now it has propagated. So it took probably around 10 minutes. Okay, so sometimes it's fairly quick. And you can see that the first domain is secure as well. Here's the certificate, again issued by Let's Encrypt authority. In this course, you learned how to deploy a droplet on DigitalOcean with Ubuntu, create floating IPs, set up LAMP stack on Ubuntu. You also learned to create the directory structure for hosting multiple sites on a single server. We configured name servers, DNS zone files, and virtual host files to host multiple domains on one server. We also made sure that each domain name had an SSL certificate using Let's Encrypt. We hope you enjoyed this course. If you're looking for a much more in-depth course on server configuration and web development, please be sure to check out our Web Development Masterclass. In the Web Development Masterclass, we offer a much more comprehensive guide to server configuration. Also, the course takes you from beginner to expert in coding and creating dynamic, database-driven web applications using the latest scripting languages. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next course.